Well, welcome back. This is episode 19 of Reading Between the Lines with Tan the Man. Today I have Sam with me. Sam doesn't really need an introduction. He's pretty well known within the industry, but he is a founder of Non-Fungibly Curious. He's also a partner at Dream Ventures, which is a VC fund. Sam, it's great to have you here with us.
Thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate it. Looking forward to the conversation.
Absolutely, Sam. Even though people can just Google you and they'll find out a lot about yourself, Sam, why don't you give us a brief introduction about yourself personally?
Yeah, sure. It's a crazy road that got me to, like, I'm sure it is for a lot of people that got me into the Web3 space, but I guess I'll try to make it the cliff notes. My background is in streaming media. I formerly worked with and ran a poker content production company here where I'm based in Las Vegas called Poker Go. We did streaming, production, distribution of live poker tournaments and events. I guess on a different note, over the past couple of years, I've been separately doing some crypto investing very passively since 2017 or 2018. I've been doing some angel investing around since 2019 into a portfolio that exists today of around 30 or 40 different companies. And then I left the poker business around 2020. I took a couple years doing some general brand, social media growth consultancy for a few startups I had previously invested in. And then early part of last year, like a lot of people, NFTs came up on my radar. And I didn't necessarily fall in love with it right away because I didn't yet see the practical use cases. But that very quickly changed in the middle part of the year. And a lot of that stemmed from my background in media, where I quickly began to see NFTs as a way to foster fandom, fan engagement, and create community around IP passion audiences or passion topics that people love. And those two things together led me to where I'm at today, which is doing consulting for various IP holders and brand partners, creating NFT experiences that drive digital fandom. So kind of a long winding road of getting there, but really happy to be here. And really it's the items you mentioned in terms of what I'm working on now are just a small piece of a larger pie. And truly the spirit of Web3, I've enjoyed working on just really cool things and being there early, as they like to say, to be a part of and participate and be a fly on the wall, even in some cases, to all these really cool projects happening in the space right now.
Absolutely. Sam, you've been through the dot-com bubble, you've been through the 2017 crypto winter. Why don't you talk to us a little bit about the experiences and what your learnings are from both of those?
Yeah, sure. So the dot-com bubble, yes, I technically was living through the dot-com bubble, but it was living in the context of being a small child, and probably at that point 6 or 7 years old when all was playing out. So I grew up in the internet on the other side of the dot-com bubble, and obviously heard stories growing up and the context of the Web3 stuff happening today in the current bear market. It's an interesting parallel and one that I hear about a lot. So I adopted the internet, so to speak, on the other side of that bubble crash. So there's been an interesting parallel in my mind of, what is that adoption curve that comes from here, and I believe that to be coming. I think people were similarly, and if you look at past articles and other editorial pieces around the internet as a technology, then there's a lot that you see similar now, where you have mainstream media and other outlets dunking on crypto and crypto users, because it's very easy to kick a technology like this while it's down. But I still firmly believe in the practical use cases, which, as we've seen unfold over the past 20 plus years since the dot-com bubble, we've seen those, not only the use cases come to be, but the use cases then firmly take over those existing behaviors, and the parties who refuse to adopt the technology then fall by the wayside. The Blockbusters of the world, you think about like Blockbuster versus Netflix, with Netflix being built upon the rails of the internet and Blockbuster not adjusting accordingly. Time and time again, in a very short span of time, we've seen drastic shifts in the business landscape because of the technology that was supposedly dead 20 some odd years ago. So I think we're in that 20 years ago spot for crypto today. And in the next decade, 2 decades, and on, I think we start to see that shift in mainstream adoption, where there's a high likelihood that the crypto-based, Web3-based technologies being built today are going to supplant the existing user behaviors in a way that makes people's lives better. And it will be the businesses that don't adjust that will fall by the wayside because of it. And I think there's room for everyone to win should they adopt the technology. But I just think the technology is too powerful and too beneficial to the masses that such that the eventual adoption becomes inevitable. So that's, I guess, in not so few words, the parallel I see between today and the dot-com bubble. But then to harken back to 2017, 2018 in terms of the last crypto bull to bear, that we're now kind of seeing a similar trajectory today. I think this time around is probably worse, just because anytime we saw additional, I think, mainstream attention on the space over the past few years that we didn't see previously. I recall I wasn't super actively involved, and definitely not, I was not working in the industry, and I was not heavily invested in the industry then, but I can very much recollect as someone who bought the top exactly how I saw it. There was basically a span of like 3 to 6 months where Bitcoin and other primary cryptocurrencies really got on the radar, and you would see it on a regular basis on CNBC and on the news, and it was this big hot trend that fizzled out. Like it only got so high as it could based upon existing liquidity, where it all had to end at some point. Whereas over the past few years, we saw adoption to the nth degree and mainstream appeal that we hadn't seen previously. So we always like to make fun of Matt Damon and the Super Bowl commercials here in the United States, where you had really, really relevant people like Tom Brady, Steph Curry, Matt Damon, Larry David, and others going out there and putting their name against cryptocurrencies. You have athletes taking their payment as cryptocurrencies. You got the mayor of Miami or New York, I forget which one it was who did this, but he took his annual salary in Bitcoin, where there was this, at least I felt this way, that there was this public sort of sign of approval and acceptance. And with that came a lot of additional liquidity, which obviously that created a lot of the bull run, and that it didn't feel like at the time that was ever going to end. There was arena deals getting signed. There was the really crazy moment to me was when, which in hindsight is now kind of funny, but during the baseball World Series, there was the umpires were wearing an FTX patch on their breast of their shirt, where it's like, wow, this is like on the biggest stage of America's pastime, you have FTX front and center, and like everyone is seeing this. And that it was like this moment of, as they say, euphoria, where everyone has seen crypto. I feel like everyone was engaging with it, and that's why this one hurts worse. I feel like, because I feel like previously you had this core bubble of users being harmed, where they were believers, so you knew that they'd be back, and certainly there were some people that churned out, but for the most part, people hunkered down and they were there for the long haul. They believed in the technology. That's why they were there early. In this case, at least to me, it feels like there's a lot more that were called speculators at worst, but at best, just mom and pop investors, where crypto had become so accepted that they had to diversify their portfolio to add a crypto position to their investments, their larger investments next to their 401k, to their real estate. And it became like a respectable asset class, which once you have that perception and that perception gets lost, it's very hard to bring that back. So that's what concerned me most about this cycle and why I see it as different, because there was a lot of the retail investors, a lot of mom and pops that were harmed in the process because they are seeing FTX during the World Series and saying, oh, I'm going to go invest in crypto now because Matt Damon told me to. They're the ones who are really getting hurt, and those are the ones who may not be back, which not that small piece in the context of the larger global macroeconomic picture is troubling to me. But I think the solve to it is less emphasis on the investment mechanism of crypto, more emphasis on the use case of crypto, which I think is where a lot of the NFTs and metaverse stuff comes into play, because there's a lot of implications to things that don't cost a lot of money, and things that don't people don't have to spend a lot of money in order to engage with it. And so I think the technology itself is where I think the focus needs to be in building around the infrastructure of it all versus focusing so much on the price of Bitcoin, price of Ethereum, and all these things that we're looking at a regular day basis. There's a lot that can be stripped back from that to actually focus on how it delivers value to people versus how it bolsters their pocketbooks or bank accounts.
Absolutely. So you've grown up a gamer, right? And you even met your partner at Dream Ventures playing a game. Why don't you talk a little bit
Right.
about that, please?
Yeah, sure. So he might kill me for sharing the story, but it's a funny one, so I will. We were in the same prom group when we were in high school, and by no fault of theirs, they had other things going on, but our dates both ditched us, and it was our first night meeting, and so we're two dudes sitting around at prom without our dates, kind of figuring out what to do with ourselves. And we started connecting and started talking, and then it came out to be that we're both gamers, and we're kind of like, okay, what game do you play? Well, I play an MMORPG. What kind of game do you play? Well, I do too. Which MMO do you play? And it turned out we were passionate enthusiasts of the same game, which is World of Warcraft. And little did I know, I had been playing independently, but he had this whole network at our school of other World of Warcraft players, which then they brought me into, and the rest is history. That group today still remains some of my best friends. That we don't necessarily actively gaming anymore, but we still spend a lot of time together. And that was a cool experience for me of being able to create connections in virtual worlds. And naturally, we all went to school together, so we had the physical complement to our digital presence. But the best times that we spent together were on the battlefield, in arenas, in cities, going to the auction house in World of Warcraft and doing quests together. And those were truly as utilizing our characters as digital representations of ourselves, with each our unique skill sets and each providing value to our group in different ways than someone else in our group would. That really became an experience in and of itself, and fostered what has become more physical connections, fostered them digitally in very authentic ways. And so that's a lot of what has inspired me in thinking about this world being Web3, is how so much of our physical experiences can be replaced by digital activities in a way that is more immersive, more scalable, and at least as authentic as the physical experiences can be. So that's thinking about when we're doing this with the Metaverse Street Journal. That's what's so exciting to me, is how does the metaverse build that mainstream appeal through creating those authentic experiences. And I think we're gonna really see that play itself out over the next few years even.
Absolutely. So let me ask you this: as you said that you're a gamer at heart, what games are you currently playing?
Yeah, that's a good question. We recently, Modern Warfare 2 came out. So actually a few of the buddies I used to play World of Warcraft with, we do a lot of Call of Duty Warzone. It's kind of one of those fun ones where it's not super time consuming, and you can kind of get in and get out as you want. Gotta spend a few hours and then bounce out for the week. So we do a lot of that as opposed to the grind that World of Warcraft can be. And then I'm big into gaming for, like, I call it getting into flow and being able to detach myself, especially in the current market climate where it's not super great to be checking crypto and Web3 news all the time. So I try to spend a couple nights a week kind of vegging out and playing like a very casual, doesn't require a lot of thought game. And the one for me right now is playing a lot of Pokemon. Again, back to growing up, we were big Pokemon people in our household. So I still like to play all the new games that come out, and I do that on my Nintendo Switch today. So it's a bit of a dichotomy from the chaos of a Warzone to the common peace of playing Pokemon. But all around, it's like I still see gaming as a big part of my life, which has been a lot of fun.
Absolutely.
If you like the video, please hit the like button. If you think what's being discussed is nice and you'd like to join the discussion, please comment below. And if you'd like to stay updated, please subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon. Thank you.
So Sam, why don't you talk us a little bit through your educational and professional background? How does Sam come into the VC space, the NFT space, just to understand your personal background better.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned a little bit about it earlier. It was a long, windy road. Um, but I credit that windy road for a lot of where I've gotten to today in terms of the diversity of experience that I have across various sectors, experiences, verticals, industries. I believe I mentioned I majored in accounting in college. I then moved to Vegas actually to get into real estate originally before getting involved in the media business. And then when I got hired in the media industry for Poker Go, I had been working in marketing, basically in like a junior marketing type role. And by the nature of being at the time, I think I was 23 or 24. And I, as a younger person then, this was in 2015, cord cutting continues to be, but was a kind of a newer thing in 2015. And I saw that trend playing itself out in real time. Whereas we had originally launched as Poker Central, which was designed to be a 24/7 TV network for poker events, much like the Golf Channel for poker. And I saw this I guess call it swimming upstream for our brand, where we were trying to our big mission initiative and what was going to be the determinant of success for us was gaining carriage on major cable and satellite operators, where we would get a channel that says Poker Central, which you would think is rather easy, but apparently it's not. And we had a very difficult time getting on the right platforms to actually grow enough of a critical mass to be able to drive enough viewership to sell advertisements against, which that was the core business. Like if you're not getting on TV channels, then no one's gonna be able to watch you unless you can't sell advertising to actually make your channel profitable. So at the same time, there were not only very major content providers that were being spun up without needing TV carriage. They were done entirely through streaming platforms, over the top devices, where the one that comes to mind vividly for me is Crunchyroll, which was a streaming platform for anime content. And I forget what it was, but they sold to someone, I don't even want to say a name. They sold for several hundred $1,000,000. And seeing an example like that really inspired me for what Poker Go could become. So I spent a lot of time spearheading that initiative, and that became what Poker Go is today. So got into brand building, content development, content production, and eventually became president of that business. So got to see every facet of the business through that way. And then that all kind of led to where I am today. So I'm very blessed to have been involved in every aspect of the business. And ultimately, that's allowed me to have a very 360 worldview of stuff on the consulting side through all this.
Absolutely. So Sam, let me ask you this question. While you're stint at Poker Go, you also worked on another project which is called NFT Stadium, right? What's NFT Stadium?
Yeah, so just to maybe catch us up on the past couple of years, so I'm doing NFT strategic consulting now. One of those clients is Poker Go. So funny enough, I reference several years working for them as an employee, took a couple of years off, and then I'm back working with them in a consulting capacity on NFT and Web3 strategies. So NFT Stadium is another client of mine that I'm working with closely, and actually I've brought Poker Go and NFT Stadium together, where NFT Stadium is the publisher of Poker Go NFTs, and really the premise and mission of NFT Stadium is to create very immersive fan experiences through NFT strategies in digital mediums. So a bit of what we touched on earlier around the aspects of NFTs and why they were so compelling to me in driving fandom, driving community, and the power that has to a brand. NFT Stadium is looking to do that in various sectors. So we work a lot, obviously, with Poker Go in the gaming/casino space. We're actually exploring expansion more heavily into that casino loyalty angle, because inherently, by the nature of that business, the core customer value is when an individual comes to a casino to gamble, but that value is largely confined, except when you have an online gaming complement, that value is restricted to the time they're in your brick and mortar property. So how can you create value digitally and immersively, really, via NFTs that may not necessarily monetize the customer, but retains the customer and creates the feedback loop and behavior loop of getting them back into your property and through rewards mechanisms and so on. And then we do a lot in just, like I mentioned, general gaming, and then a lot in sports as well. So we recently announced a partnership with I call it soccer, other would call it football club out of Spain. That's really exciting. So really wherever fandom lives, NFT Stadium serves to provide the Web3 infrastructure to activating Web3 and metaverse strategies. And I think it really solves a problem that I've personally seen as a collector in the marketplace. When you look at the likes of, no knock on them, they've been very successful, but the likes of Top Shot and Autograph, where you have this super powerful IP, and it's IP that knows their power. And by that, I mean, they know that people are willing to buy into whatever they're doing, regardless of what they're doing actually makes sense or means anything. And I think the result of that has been really what has become I guess a watered down collection experience, where you have people clamoring for these Top Shot moments that are basically a random regular season game layup from 5 years ago. And we can say all we want that has value, but when you actually strip things back and the speculation dries up and liquidity dries up, as we've seen in recent months, that really doesn't have a ton of value to people. And especially as they've devalued the market through creating so many of these things, I think we've seen firsthand what you're left with, which is very little after the speculation ends on a lot of these collectible based assets. Whereas we want to buck that trend by creating real utility around whatever we create in a way that allows fans to get closer to the teams, leagues, artists, performers, celebrities, whatever it may be that they love. And that's our only requisite who we work with is, do you have a fandom, no matter how big or small they may be? And do you have an authentic reason and an authentic strategy for super serving that fandom and creating experiences for people to enjoy that fandom, not only with the brand or celebrity personality themselves, but with one another, which I think is a very cool phenomenon that NFTs unlock. So that's really what we strive to do. And that's Poker Go is just one example of the larger mission that NFT Stadium has.
Absolutely. So let me ask you this question, and perhaps you'll have to bring on your hat not only as a creative person but also as a venture capitalist into this, right? So we see a lot of use cases of NFTs. Since you've worked in the casino/gambling industry for a long time, a lot of users are skeptic of the fact that there are algorithms running, especially when you have digital casinos, right, that already know the outcome before the cards are dealt with, right? So in order to sort of put your customers at a better satisfaction, is it possible that we can sort of create these digital decks into an NFT where the algorithm is not defining it, it's already defined, it's behind a closed key, so you don't know what's the card because it's behind an encrypted key. But once that card is dealt with, that key can be published and it can be verified through blockchain, whether it's centralized or decentralized, that indeed the card was decided, I don't know, 2 days in advance or 3 days in advance, right? And you can have these digital decks already created. So do you see that use case of NFT coming forward in future in terms of NFTs?
Yeah, I mean, what you're describing is beyond my level of technical comprehension. So it's difficult for me to accurately convey the nuances of that, which doesn't necessarily mean that I don't see promise for something like that. And I think that's one of the challenges, and this applies to so many aspects of NFTs at large, is around when I don't have one with me, but I normally always do because I'm a poker degenerate. But if you have a deck of cards, you can see the dealer shuffling, you can see them dealing, and you have a general acceptance because you can see it of the fact, okay, this is a truly random shuffle. What I'm getting is truly random and cannot be expected. When you sort of have this when you sort of have this like Wizard of Oz, man behind the curtain, whether it's not necessarily a man, but it's a line of code that's outputting you whatever. It's not unlike a slot machine where you have or video poker machine where you have essentially what is software on the back end that is outputting as a certain percentage chance that some outcome will occur. You're betting on that chance to happen. Some people will find that suspicious because you don't exactly know what are like in the case of a video poker machine. I think this is exactly true. People still play it, but depending on what jurisdiction you're in, you can actually fine tune the outputs where the payouts will occur less over thousands of hands, and that's all regulated by certain gaming authorities to say, you know, your payouts, you have to pay out X% amount of the time, and that ensures safe and fair play for casino goers. Now, although people, and this goes back to the barrier of understanding, a system that could occur within the context of like a smart contract of say outputting truly random results is it's not the black box that you actually see regularly in casinos, where you don't exactly know what the back end is on that machine you're playing that says this outcome has to occur X% of the time. But in fact, it's entirely verifiable and written on the smart contract where you will receive this result X% of the time. And there are Oracle-based mechanisms, and this is where I'm going to butcher the technical language here, but there's mechanisms on the back end which are all clearly visible and confirmed to be truthful in terms of how they output results. Where it's actually, I think there's a trepidation because people see it like not being able to have true trust in what the result output is, but that's the nature of a trustless system, is you don't need the trust for that result to be verified because the system itself that outputs that result is all on chain, all in public view, which I think it's, even as I sit here as a supposed expert in this world, I have a hard time properly explaining it, which goes to show how hard it is to understand it for someone outside of our ecosystem right now. So I think, I don't know if that answered the question properly, but I think there's a clear use case there from my world in the gambling space. But I think that a lot of that translates to other elements of NFTs as well, especially the one I always think about is just generally ownership. Like it's hard to, we've gotten so used to digital ownership and talking about NFTs regularly, but the actual meaning of digital ownership is very abstract. Like I hold this stapler, I have it, that means I own it. Society has told me that if I have a filing cabinet here with my car title in it, that if I hold that means I own the car. Same goes for a house deed. But thinking about how you own a picture on the internet, like that is a quite the logical jump to have make sense. And I think just being able to apply certain expectations and realities that we take as granted in the physical world and being able to apply those to digital mediums, like the example of gaming and true randomness, if we can apply that to the digital world, starts to make sense. If we can take aspects of physical ownership and apply that to the digital world, it starts to make sense. I think we're going to see a lot of these things happen in terms of like get people to understand them and appreciate them in the coming years. But that's going to be the hard part, I think, because once those things click, I think the rest in terms of adoption and acceptance falls into place pretty easily, but it's about helping people wrap their head around these very complex and abstract themes that are going to become very important.
Absolutely. Sam, let me then move on to Non-Fungibly Curious, which is your consultancy firm for NFTs and Web3 for brands and corporates. You do a lot of work with it. So why don't you give us a brief introduction? What is it? What are you trying to achieve with it?
Yeah, sure. So I touched on a little bit with poker going to NFT Stadium, but ultimately, I think given my media background and my interest in this space, a lot of what I spend my time doing is working with brands around super serving fandom. So wherever that fandom exists, I feel like I can provide some insight in being able to create NFT and Web3 strategies that make that experience more authentic. So in addition to NFT Stadium and Poker Go, I'm working with a few parties on the advisory side, just kind of providing passive input on strategies on a week-to-week basis as we go along. And ultimately the spirit of it for me, to be frank, because I'm a year and change into it now, so I feel like I can say this in hindsight. I originally got into it from the standpoint of learning on the job, where I felt like I had so much to learn about the NFT space, but I also felt like I knew a lot more than a lot of other people. And so I didn't come into this saying I know everything, and I still don't, that I know everything and here's the ABC XYZ of what you need to be doing in order for you to make money or to be successful or to launch a top 10 NFT collection. And in fact, if that was my directive, I would probably pass the opportunity, because that's a very tough nut to crack. It's a very crowded space, and it's a very busy space, and there's not a silver bullet to make that happen. And if anyone's trying to sell you one, then you should be very suspicious. But for me, it was about the learning effort for not only myself but also the clients that I work with, where my premise is every business has a Web3 execution to be discovered. There's a Web3 application to whatever you're doing in a way that provides value to your customers and fandom in some way, shape, or form. Web3 strategies are not one size fits all, and Web3 strategies are ever growing, ever building over time. And it's not like a Twitter strategy where you launch a Twitter and then you start producing content and then that's like we execute the strategy. Web3 is built around, okay, this, then what? Okay, this, then what? And that applies to not only launching collectibles, collections, utility, games, metaverse experiences, whatever it may be. So a lot of it's around discovery and curiosity, but the nature of the beast is unlike in a lot of other areas of business where you launch something and your product is live. This can be experimental. It can grow over time. And for that matter, I always endorse trying things before committing to things, because by the nature of having that community and audience that is comprised of your core customers, you will get very quick feedback on where you should develop your strategy as you go along. So it doesn't make sense to do too much too quickly, because ultimately in a great strategy, it'll be guided by the community itself. So the whole that's very fluffy, but back to the whole non-fungibly curious, that's the spirit of what I try to do with brands, is maintain an air of learning, education, and curiosity that leads development of NFT and Web3 strategies versus making it all about the directive of strategic execution. And here's what you should be doing. It's a lot about learning. It's about growth and development over time, because I'm the first to admit and accept that that Web3 is not where we need it to be in order to be appealing to the populace. So in the meantime, let's kind of tinker while we have this sort of smaller sandbox of user adoption, and then use this as the foundation for whatever the strategy becomes in the years to follow.
Absolutely.
If you like the video, please hit the like button. If you think what's being discussed is nice and you'd like to join the discussion, please comment below. And if you'd like to stay updated, please subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon. Thank you.
Sam, let me ask you this. As the founder of Non-Fungibly Curious, how did you come up with the name?
Well, a lot of it was just that around the whole education piece. And I saw an issue with a lot of the consultancies in the space where everyone loves to claim themselves to be an expert or to speak about the space as an authority. And I always found myself with almost an extreme questioning of everything, including my own knowledge. And that's just the nature of the nascence of this industry, where I don't think anyone really knows the eventual outcomes of all of this. And further, there's so many doors and roads to go down in Web3, where to say that you have all the answers is to just be wrong. So I try to make it my brand of taking an exploratory approach to all Web3 strategies. You don't need to have all the answers, but it's about doing and exploring and learning before committing, I guess, and doing so with a long-term horizon in mind. I never endorse like you need to launch a project now where you need to make X amount of dollars in the next 6 months in order to be successful. It's all about long-term growth and long-term vision.
Yeah.
But then it's also about approachability. And I think when you see a lot of like especially the high budget, I guess, brands that have gotten involved in the world, like the Adidas, the Nikes of the world, and the things that they're doing. It's like I could never execute a strategy like that. But they chose to boil the ocean, and they had the budgets to do so, to hire the teams and to acquire the projects. In the case of Nike, that gave them a great jumping off point. But as we've seen in recent days with some of the artifact bad news and call it FUD that's gone on, even those brands aren't doing it great. So I always say, look, you don't need to do that right away. You don't need to have all the answers out off the jump. Let's go arm in arm, hand in hand, and let's get to know this space better. Like, let me be a resource to you. And this is me on the consultancy side. Let me answer all the questions you have and explain things to you in a digestible way. But I'm also not going to push you into a box of needing to launch something. Like, I'm here to help you understand how Web3 benefits your business, how it makes your customer experience better, and how it leads to brand advocacy and loyalty over time. And over time is the operative word there, because it doesn't need to be all right away. And that's why I think curiosity really encapsulates that. It's all around the exploratory nature of where I think brands should be looking at this from for the time being, versus the executing nature of needing to implement a strategy right away.
Absolutely. And it's refreshing to hear a person such as you say that you don't know enough about Web3, right? In today's world, you don't see enough people doing that. Everyone wants to project themselves as the biggest expert in every field, right? So that is definitely refreshing. So let me ask you this question, Sam. With your startup, Non-Fungibly Curious, why didn't you keep the name non-fungibly consultants?
I mean, I guess I could have. This may be my own stigma that I've attached to it, but I've always seen consultants as very stuffy. And in fact, I hate the term. I think of like McKinsey and Deloitte and other like major institutionals where you bring in a bunch of old dudes in suits for thousands of dollars per hour to come in and tell you how to run your business, when in fact a lot of those insights could probably be discovered on your own, but it perhaps helps to be told by an outsider versus to just do it yourself. So I think consultancy in most cases is a drastic waste of money generally, and has a certain lack of appeal to me. So, and again, and back to the whole curiosity thing, I think consultants are their job is to come in, get to know your business, and then give you a PowerPoint presentation on everything that you should be doing. Whereas I don't do that. I come in and say, well, I want to get to know your business, and I think this is all really cool. Here's what you could do. Here's what you could not do in terms of activating Web3. Because I don't think we're at that point now where I don't think you have to have a Web3 strategy in order to have a long-term viability. Much like in the 90s, you didn't have to have a website in order to be a viable business. I think that day may come. I think it won't be for 10 plus years. So for the time being, like, let's kind of explore and feel things out versus feeling like you need to do everything all at once, which is where curiosity comes into play. So I always advocate for, rather than I call myself a consultant just because it's an easy job title, but I think of it more as like shared learning more than it's consulting, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. So you said that you work with a lot of Web2 brands that are sort of transitioning onto Web3. Why should a Web2 brand even think about transitioning to Web3?
I think there's a larger message which isn't worth getting into with you. Probably your already somewhat native audience around the transitions of Web 1, Web 2 to Web 3. The key message that I typically convey in terms of what is the power of Web 3 for brands, it goes back to me around community ownership, of holding a sense of autonomy in the direction of the brand itself in some instances, but really just having a seat at the table. So for any brand, whatever their business is, taking a subset of your core customers, your most passionate audiences, and empowering them through asset ownership to be voices, not only to your brand, of being able to have direct lines with whatever you're doing to say, here's what I think as one of your most passionate customers, audience members, but then advocates for your brand as well, of being able to turn customer behavior into, I almost think of it like a badging mechanism. So the example that I like to think about for me, which sports teams have done this brilliantly, which we take for granted now, but sports teams are a business. Sports teams are a brand, and they're obviously a lot of their outcomes are tied to performance, but much of the revenue is tied to fandom. So how their fans buy tickets, purchase merchandise, go to events, engage with the team, whatever it may be. And unlike any other business, the fans hold a sense of pride and ownership over the team itself. And that manifests itself in the form of buying jerseys, for example. And people go into a team store and they buy something from the brand, from the team, for themselves to own. And they don't do it as necessarily as just as a simple transaction mechanism, but it's a way in the physical world to say, I affiliate, I align myself with this organization, and this says something about me. A lot of times it's based upon geographies, where you were born, where you were raised, what team you grew up supporting. But it's like a badging mechanism and an advocacy mechanism, where this team as a brand is now being advocated in a grassroots level by the fans that support it. So how can we take that and translate that phenomenon, A, to perhaps non-endemic brands being non-sports teams, but B, also put them in the context of digital to be more scalable? Because I say, for example, when I'm walking down the street in, let's say, a foreign country, we have a hockey team here in town called the Golden Knights, probably like my favorite sports team these days. And if I see someone wearing a Golden Knights logo in some foreign city or country, I'm like, hell yeah, I like that guy. Go Knights, go, is what we would say. And I know I have an immediate connection with someone like that, but that's not exactly scalable. I can only be connected with the people that I physically see walking down the street. But what if you translate that to a digital world, and everyone who holds, let's say, the equivalent of a jersey for an organization is able to congregate together at a shared location, digital location, at a moment in time for some shared experience? And that's, I think, the power of Web3 for brands to me, is scaling advocacy in such a way where you turn customers from brand supporters and customers into brand loyalists and advocates, and then creating digital experiences around that advocacy that develop a sense of pride in representing that brand at large, and making that scalable digitally. And there's a lot of abstract terms and buzzwords in there, but I think we haven't fully unlocked the power of that phenomenon. But that's what I try to enforce with the brands that I work with, is the impact is yet to fully unfold, but to lay that infrastructure now and create that experience today will likely yield massive dividends in the years to come.
Absolutely. So Sam, as you work with a lot of these founders and companies, what mistakes do you see brands make with their NFT and Web3 strategies?
So the primary one to me is just getting in for the wrong reasons and doing so with a short-term horizon. And oftentimes that's based upon, and that's by the nature of the speculative market that we've seen over the past couple of years, but going in with a revenue-based focus. I mean, you'll notice how not at one point when I described like what is the power of Web3 to brands, that I ever say it's because you can make a lot of money. Yeah. I just don't think, I think in the short term, Web3 is a marketing expense.
Yes.
But marketing has its place in a business model. And I think the ROI can be difficult to measure with that in mind, because what is the value of customer advocacy and turning your customers into almost ambassadors of your business? And that's hard to say without, detailed and intricate measurement over time. But I think going in with the focus of how much can we make off this project, how much revenue can we drive, is the first big mistake. Second big mistake is thinking that it's a singular activation. Like Web3 is a box that you check, you activate your strategy, and then that's it. The Web3 strategy is meant to evolve over time. So there's all these technologies at your disposal, and the best technologies are yet to be seen, really. So it'd be foolish to say, here's what we're going to do in Web3 and here's what we're going to marry ourselves to for the foreseeable future. I think of it as taking like more baby steps and launching small iterations of a long-term vision. And it is that long-term vision that's important to have, and use that as the North Star for your brand in terms of what you're launching, but utilizing various Web3 tool sets that put you in the direction of getting there, understanding that you never actually get there per se, but you're just always evolving your strategy as you go along. And Absolutely. Then I suppose lastly would be around lack of education and just trying to do too much too quickly. So I think a lot of times brands will think they have all the answers, and you hire MBA type folks from institutions around the country and put them in charge of strategy without being native to where that strategy comes from. And the net result is a lot of mistakes that get made along the way. And the blessing, one of the core features of the blockchain is its permanence and immutability, but that becomes a bug very quickly to brands where if you screw up, there's an on-chain, very real historical record of that screw up for the forever future. And we've seen brands launch things that they had to then pull back, and it becomes a black eye on their strategic execution for the indefinite future, as long as Web3 is a thing, which obviously for people like us, we believe it will be forever. So I always all those things in aggregate. My recommendation, to flip it to the opposite of like what are my positive recommendations, it's to not try to do too much too quickly, take an approach of learning and using that learning to understand how does your brand fit into Web3 and what is the long-term vision for that fit. So that it's not trying to do too much, not trying to drive revenue right away. It's not trying to have all the answers. It's about short-term exploration, long-term vision, and the two of those together leading to strategic direction over time.
Absolutely.
If you like the video, please hit the like button. If you think what's being discussed is nice and you'd like to join the discussion, please comment below. And if you'd like to stay updated, please subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon. Thank you.
Sam, let me ask you a personally selfish question. Do you see news and media companies taking Web3 as a technology and adopting it fast enough?
So media companies specifically?
Yeah, news companies or media companies.
I hate to be the arbiter or pass judgment on fast enough, because I personally don't set timelines against anything. Much like I advocate to others, I have this long-term vision of where this goes without necessitating certain milestones or benchmarks to judge success or failure upon that adoption trend or adoption curve. However, I've seen the opposite, which are media companies trying to do it too quickly. The one that comes to mind, which I wrote about a while back, was actually CNN, where they had launched an NFT collection comprised of like major announcements and historical moments that they had built this community around. And much like a lot of projects in Web3 today, they fizzled out very quickly. And I think we see that as a bit of case in point of what could go wrong, where they've since, I think 2 or 3 months ago now, they announced that they were no longer going to be serving that collection. They took down their marketplace, I believe, but they basically folded the entire thing. So anyone who bought into it originally, they got some of their money back, but when we ended up holding the bag and taking a loss for it, where that was what I would consider a counterexample, where I'm not advocating anyone doing anything not fast enough, because I'll be the first to say, if you don't feel like you're ready to launch something, don't do it. Like there's a permanence to this thing that if you're not well positioned and have like the right intent in mind to do this, you shouldn't do it. So to take the opposite of that, where you have media companies who have tried to do things without having that long-term vision, or without having like a sound long-term strategy, and have ended up with pie on their face because of it. So I guess to answer the question more succinctly, no, I don't think I have an issue with video and media companies not launching things quickly enough. In fact, I have the opposite. I have the opposite issue, where video and media companies have launched things too quickly and ended up falling on their face because of it.
Absolutely. Sam, as a fanboy of Harry Potter, let me ask you this question. We saw Harry, right? He was reading a newspaper, and within that newspaper, there was a live video playing. And I remember the scene where Sirius Black was sent to the prison, and that video kept playing over and over again.
Yep.
Right? Do you see AR technology, whether using Google Glass or whatever, integrating into physical newspapers where the physical newspaper is a printed edition, but on top of that, it is also AR video play. So for instance, if you're reading a news, perhaps the video can play at the same time while you're reading the newspaper, physical newspaper in front of you. And the second part of this question is, do you think the next boom era of newspapers is ahead of us?
Okay, so there's lots to unpack there. First off, I want to say I'm more of a Lord of the Rings guy myself. My wife is massive into Harry Potter, so I know what you're talking about nonetheless, even if I may not be the biggest fan myself. And I appreciate the thought. That's kind of crazy that we're now talking about what was written in the context of wizardry. We're now talking about in a practical business conversation, which goes to show how far we've come since this was all written 20 years ago or whatever it was, which is kind of a cool aha moment for me here. Nonetheless, I think it's a very feasible future. I think that the biggest hurdle to activating anything to AR, I mean, we've seen case in point of AR, the success of AR given like Pokemon Go. And I actually think I think this the creator of Pokemon Go created a Harry Potter equivalent, if I'm not mistaken. I didn't play it myself, but we may not be far off from this world you speak of. However, I think the biggest impediment to creating this sort of accepted widespread experience around AR that's not necessarily about entering a game to participate, but rather this is our reality that you're kind of attesting to, is around the hardware. So Pokemon Go works because we all have the same mobile device or a similar mobile device in our pockets where we could access the same world through the same lens, so to speak, the lens being the device. However, you mentioned Google Glasses there. We've seen attempts at that from Google Glasses, which I've never really engaged with myself. Snapchat had their spectacles for a while. We've seen attempts at like optical hardware, and we just haven't gotten to that point. I think we're now seeing that's the context of AR. We're seeing it in VR too with Meta and their Oculus and all that. So that to me is interesting, but I think if we can get there, the sky's the limit. I mean, that's like newspapers are a singular iteration of everything. I mean, as I look around here in my office and all my blank white walls behind me, imagine not needing physical art where you could present what would be eventually the NFTs, but you could present parts of like things that are meaningful to you, images, artwork, whatever it may be, on your walls without needing to actually put them up, because people who are coming into your home will have the visual representation of those things as you see them. So I'm standing here, I see this piece of art. Someone standing over there wearing the same glasses, they see this piece of art, whether the art's actually there or not, but you both see it. So by the nature of a shared reality, being in this case augmented reality, it becomes a real thing. So in the context of newspapers, that's exactly right. And I don't want to go too far down this road because I could go for days on like what possibly could be. But I think the spirit of it is that that's only possible, but we're actively approaching that point in time. And to me, the question is just a hardware question of like what becomes like the accepted device to unlock that potential. And I don't exactly know what that is yet. And then what was part two? Sorry, I kind of got out of line there.
I just wanted to find out whether sort of using this AR technology, we all know that newspapers are dying. And a lot of people have written off newspaper industry as a dying industry. So if this becomes reality, do you see the next boom era of newspaper industry coming through because of this integration of AR with physical newspapers? And before you answer that, I just wanted to make a small comment. Since you were talking about art, I love the picture in your background with the Eiffel Tower and the Eiffel Tower.
Oh, thank you. That's funny. That's a Lego Eiffel Tower, and that's my wife and I in the context of I had someone on Etsy create us in the style of American Dad, which is one of my favorite cartoony shows. And so that's a picture of us in the Eiffel Tower next to a Lego figure of the Eiffel Tower. So yeah, thank you for noticing that.
Absolutely.
But we would one of our first trips together was to Paris, so that has a lot of memories there. Anyways, back to the point. I think the thing is, it's hard. It's a challenge for just the question of, the newspaper industry is dying. Do we think there's a revival of it? But I think let's like breaking down news and paper. Like, what is the new era? Let's remove news. Like, I think we can all accept it. There, we need some outlet for obtaining news. So I have confidence in news as an industry in the long term. Now, paper. And I think that's the part that we need to zero in on and think about, like, what is the long-term viability of that? What is the future iteration of that as an industry? Is the answer, like, would you call an AR driven news source a paper? Like, I don't know, is that like an AR newspaper, or is this a different medium for news entirely, where, maybe you get a QR code on a daily basis, and then you view that within your glasses, and then up populates this, like, right in front of you, that maybe you place on your hands, like a virtual paper, which then, like you have on, I think of Tinder, but swiping, and then you swipe your hand to get to the next page of this virtual paper, which maybe that's paper, maybe that's not, but it's a non-answer to a very reasonable question, because I just have a hard time assigning my existing definitions of what is the newspaper industry to future potential possibilities. Absolutely. But I think in the context of, do I think there's a future for something that I can receive on a daily basis that is personal to me in some capacity? Like, I choose which paper that I purchase, whether it be the San Diego Tribune, the LA Times, the Las Vegas Review Journal, something personal to me that I receive daily that I can read through. Or the Metaverse Street Journal. I wanted to use. I purposely didn't say the Wall Street Journal or a comparison to the Metaverse Street Journal, because I wanted to give old school examples. Because to land the plane, I think you have room for the Metaverse Street Journal and things that are similar, that become a personal source for news in whatever medium you are comfortable consuming it. And I'm curious to see where you take this to determine, to be on the cutting edge of what are those mediums, and how you harness the future of user behavior to provide that compelling experience.
Absolutely. So Sam, let's move on to Dream Ventures. You're a partner at Dream Ventures. Let me ask you some basic questions so we understand what Dream Ventures is and what are you trying to do. So what's your investment thesis at Dream Ventures?
So my corner of Dream Ventures and where my partnership is focused is in the Web3 space. And really the thesis is around Web3 for the purposes of Web2 adoption. So our aim is to partner with Web3 projects with compelling use cases that we see being able to through forging business partnerships with Web2 businesses and Web2 entities, to hypercharge and accelerate mainstream adoption and growth in the coming months and years. So it's a bit different than I think perhaps would be a traditional VC approach to Web3, which is getting super in the weeds of like DeFi and DAO tools and tokens and things like that. We're very much, I think, of like on the intersection of Web2 and Web3, but investing on the Web3 side to bring them over into Web2.
Absolutely. What's your ticket size, Sam?
It varies pretty drastically, but typically around 500 to 750K.
Okay. And do you invest more like an accelerator or a VC fund? And my question is in terms of the equity that you take for that investment.
Again, we're pretty flexible. We don't have any sort of directive on how much of the business we have to own. Yeah. We don't typically lead rounds at this stage. We're flexible, and I would say that we're passive, but not in a way that's like in a way of deference, but more in a way of, we want to make the founders that we work with comfortable. So we have led rounds in the past, and it's not something that we go out of our way to avoid. But we ultimately like to be sort of on the sidelines and involved in the business at the early stage as much as the founders want us to be. So we've been super active in the past. We've also been more passive in the past. In terms of like the equity situation and what we typically look for, we don't typically take any, like I'm trying to use any too sweeping of language, but historically we tend to take at least 1% of the business, depending on depending on certain situations, but that's all by the nature of the stage we're investing at. So we target pre-seed and seed, and typically based upon the valuations you see there and the check size that we're writing, we typically would take a material percent, but we also don't lock ourselves in any box, or we can't pursue opportunities that would be outside of that.
Absolutely.
If you like the video, please hit the like button. If you think what's being discussed is nice and you'd like to join the discussion, please comment below. And if you'd like to stay updated, please subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon. Thank you.
So you invest in a lot of startups, and a lot of people wouldn't talk about investing in startups, right? I want to bring a different sort of question. So what's your exit strategy in terms of your portfolio companies? Do you intend to stick with them forever? Do you invest to exit at IPO? Do you invest to exit at mezzanine investment tranche? What's your exit strategy?
It depends. It's hard to give a one size fits all. Obviously, especially as we're navigating a landscape with a decent number of LPs. Liquidity events are always nice, so we wouldn't say no to those as they come to be, but we're also not the type to force or coax our portfolio companies into going public just to get to that milestone to appease our LPs. So we go into the long-term horizon, I guess, if that isn't a strategy of just kind of build for the future versus racing to the now or racing to the short term. All that being said, we're still so early. It's a high class problem to have to make that decision of liquidation or not. So perhaps we revisit this in 3 to 5 years, and my answer may change. But for the time being, we have very much like a 7 to 10 year horizon on most of our investments that allows us some flexibility with our LPs to not necessarily have any sort of liquidity expectations, I suppose.
Absolutely. So let me ask you this, as a VC within the Web3 space, and I'll piggyback off the crypto and blockchain industry as well. We see a lot of money in the industry, which some people who've been within the industry may also refer to as dumb money. And then we all know what smart money and dumb money is, right? As you're looking at the industry as a whole, what's the biggest mistake you see founders or even the industry make when it comes to dumb money, or the differences between smart money and dumb money in the industry?
It's a very good question. I have an answer. I'm just trying to convey how best to word it. Basically, let's look at the mistake from the founder side of things. I think when it comes to early stage fundraising, a lot of what drives founders, from what I've seen, for sometimes for better, but in this case for worse, is built around ego. So especially creating a startup is like having a child, and like you would see someone put a license plate frame up that says your child was student of the month at this and this elementary school. You have a sense of pride in what it is that you create. Yeah. And that manifests itself in the context of fundraising, where if you're able, it sounds a lot sexier to raise a $50 million round than it does to raise a $10 million round, which sounds sexier than raising a $5 million round. Like there's a certain level of, it's not the end goal, but there's a certain milestone that comes with raising a substantial round and getting investors to commit capital to say your business is worth this amount. And then instantaneously overnight, your net worth increases because the amount of the business that you own is then worth a similar amount in terms of a price per share, which could make you on paper a multimillionaire in hours time upon signing paperwork for that. However, back to the question about dumb money, if the valuation that you're raising at doesn't align with the true value of your business, and you're raising not for the purposes of actually growing your business in a proper way, I guess that's not really the right way of thinking about it, but you're doing it more so to inflate your valuation and create a sexy headline and boost perhaps your own value. inherently the smart investors will not be investing at that valuation because it's a bad business opportunity. Whereas the investors that you are able to finagle and convince into investing in your business are the dumb money that you speak of that don't really know what they're doing and are just writing checks for the sake of writing checks. So inherently, then in the immediate term, it's like, yes, nice. I raised this round and locked in a $50 million valuation, and I own 50% of the business still, let's say, and that makes me $25 million richer on paper overnight. And obviously that's back of napkin math. However, the result of that and the pain of that comes in the months and years to follow is trying to grow this business, because they always talk about, smart money typically tends to be strategic money, where they can get you introductions to whether it be their portfolio companies or industry contacts, important people in their network that go a great length to growing your business. Chances are 9 times out of 10, the dumb money that you took instead is not going to have that same access. So ironically, despite raising at a higher valuation, your business being worth more by raising that dumb money, you're actually hamstringing or hampering your growth in the years to follow because you don't have the smart money on your side. So that's the biggest mistake I've seen made, I think, over the past couple of years in this space, where I've seen some valuations that are just absolutely ridiculous. And I'm not the type to say that you're out of your mind, but we just pass on those immediately. And the crazy part is they've actually worked. Like, people have raised money at those valuations. And so that's why I think, like, the current state of things, that's selfishly for me in the investor side, it's healthy, because I'm not seeing that anymore. In fact, I've seen down rounds, and I've seen conversations that we had 6 months ago then come back to us and say, hey, we've slashed our valuation in half. And at the time we kind of said, this is kind of an interesting opportunity, but it's a little bit high for us. And now they're coming back and saying we can get in at half the cost, basically, of what we could have previously. That's very attractive to us. So as thinking about this long term, in the short term, we're not that upset, because we're getting better deals on the companies that we like. And at the same time, you're kind of filtering out the crap of what we've seen valuations wise, where you're just not going to be able to find, unless it's really dumb money, you're not going to be able to find the same success raising at the same valuations as companies once were, that were probably a mistake in the first place.
Sam, also let me ask you this question. So from a founder's perspective, this is great to know, but how do you differentiate between and I don't want to put those boxes, but how do you differentiate between investors who you don't want to take money from? Are there any red flags that you can sort of point to us that, as a founder, look out for these? If your investor is doing this, they're probably dumb money, right? So are there any pointers you can give to the founders?
Yeah, so I think 2 things. One, look at their portfolio. Look where else they've invested and when they invested in them. I think, like, instantaneously, if you land investors like that and they have portfolio companies that can be of strategic value to you, that stands to help your business right away. And those are introductions that are incredibly easy to make on the investor side. So, and that's on our side as investors, where we provide a lot of our value is, hey, here's who we've invested in historically, and here are the introductions that we can make for you to help you scale your business. So that's part one. And inherently, smart money will have invested in smart projects previously. So though that investment portfolio will be a great barometer of smart versus dumb money. But then further, and I think this applies to both sides, both from founder to investor, but then investor to founder, is just, do you vibe with them? Like, I think there's times I've talked to founders, this is speaking on the investor side, but there's times I've talked to founders where I don't really vibe with them. The conversation doesn't flow. Their idea makes somewhat of sense, but I don't enjoy working with them very quickly, just to be frank.
Yeah.
And then you could extrapolate that out. And I say too, like, I'm an investor and I don't really enjoy talking to this person, but I'm going to then, if I were to invest, I would be relying on this person I don't like talking to then go talk to other investors and talk to other potential partners to grow their business. And that starts to, at every stage, raises a lot of red flags. Whereas if you have a certain vibe and energy to your conversation that jives well, I find that to be a very strong promise of A, how they work together, but then to flip the script on the founder side of things, like if I were to talk to an investor and I really vibe with them and think that they're a fit for me, chances are they're having similar conversations with others and vibing with them, which goes to show the promise of who and how we could have introductions facilitated to grow my business in the years to come. So there's value on both fronts, both, like I said, investor to founder and founder to investor. That all just stems from being like a cool, normal person, which I think is an underrated aspect in the space sometimes.
Absolutely. So Sam, a lot of experts within the industry equate what domain name URLs like facebook.com or google.com were to Web 2 and draw similarities to Metaverse land being the same and equivalent to Web 3. What's your opinion on this?
Yeah, it's a great analogy. I think there's aspects of this I'm going to write down in real time. I think they're important points and I want to make sure to hit them all. I think that the first one is around scarcity. So by the nature of how URLs work, there can only be one facebook.com. I go to facebook.com. I know that I'm going to facebook.com and I can't, there's none other that exists. And I think Metaverse land translates similarly, where you have that verified scarcity. There's X number of plots that exist and there's value in holding one of these X number. I think the challenge of that is, as opposed to, well, I guess it doesn't necessarily apply, because in more recent years, they've launched, besides .coms, you've gotten into obviously .nets and orgs, but then now they have crazy ones like .vegas, .tech, whatever it may be. So there's expanding and there's expansion of these worlds, but I think I said expansion of these worlds, but expansion of these URLs and suffixes. But in the context of the metaverse, we've seen similar where there's new metaverses being created. But I think the question is going to be, what is that core? What is the .com of the metaverse that will be sort of that generally accepted hub of activity where everyone tends to go and thus everyone sees the most value? I think we're also going to see fragmentation in a way that's a bit different, but same from traditional URLs where you have .orgs that are maybe more educational, you have .ios that are maybe more techy. But in the context of metaverses, you're going to have metaverses that are built around gaming. You're going to have metaverses that are built around e-commerce. You're going to have metaverses that are built around social, so like interactions and like meetings and spending time with people. And I think that goes to the next point, which is around experience, because in a vacuum, a .com is worthless other than the traffic that it brings in. So I think that's in the context of metaverse land, that goes to location where there's value in being either next to other creators or being discoverable in the context of that world, which I'm still not sold on that, because I think metaverse land is too much similar in the within the context of a single metaverse. But I think with the nature of just the teleportation, the actual experience of getting into a metaverse, I don't think there is enough of a use case to being in a certain location, or enough of a reason to be in a certain location because you can port to whatever location you want, that I actually value one land over the other because of where it's located a ton more. But we'll put that aside for now. Back to experience, a .com is worthless if nothing's happening on it. So the Facebook.com only became as valuable as it did. Think of the word Facebook, it's dumb. Like what does that even mean? And it certainly didn't mean anything 20 years ago, but because of what was built on top of it and the user traffic that was driven to that .com and the content that was created and the network that was created around it, that's what gave it value. And I think the land is similar. And I think that's what we're lacking today, is those experiences where everyone has this vague idea of what this could be, but it's not going to be anything until there are experiences built on top of it. Like the metaverse right now is a lot in the news for not so great reasons, where Decentraland's daily active users are like in the hundreds. What you compare that to traditional games, that's nothing. But I think it goes back to the core problem, which is no one's actually creating fruitful experiences that people want to engage with within those ecosystems, as opposed to, say, World of Warcraft, for another example, where it's not necessarily Web3, but it's a metaverse environment that was created with a very fun game around it, where their daily active users, I don't know what it is these days, but they're one of the most successful games of all time. So that's just kind of the juxtaposition for me around. I think that in principle the metaverse makes sense, but I don't think we're going to see true adoption and true value in it until we have people creating experiences with it, much like Web2 businesses today were creating .com experiences in the late 90s and early 2000s.
Absolutely.
If you like the video, please hit the like button. If you think what's being discussed is nice and you'd like to join the discussion, please comment below. And if you'd like to stay updated, please subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon. Thank you.
All right, Sam, let me ask you this question. If there is a founder that's watching this interview and they're looking for funding, what would be your checklist that you would have them go through before they even approach you?
So there's no clear-cut checklist. I think my general advice would be to target the right investors, and I think that kind of irks me a little bit when someone sends me a deal that has no application to what I'm working on, and it's just they clearly searched on LinkedIn investor and just are rapid firing a deck to anyone that has that title, just trying to throw things at a wall and see what sticks. That's like an instant no for me. I think doing research into the background of the VC or investor themselves, so to see what else they've invested in, and then as you're able to within your pitch, even just the short little blurb of, hey, I see you invested in this. I think because of that, you would have great interest in this. That's a very small thing that goes a long way in terms of getting my attention and giving me a positive outlook on what you're doing prior to even opening the deck. I think that's the third part. Is a lot of founders have this, what I believe is an erroneous tendency to either require an NDA or not want to introduce the concept in a deck. You laugh there, it probably resonates. Not want to introduce a deck prior to a phone call, which, as someone like myself who just very busy, with a lot of deal flow, like I don't need to see your idea, and if I miss it, so be it. But I do want to, but if you're going to make it hard for me to, then I'm not interested. So I think NDAs are kind of BS, and I think people who don't send decks or are unwilling to before a phone call, I think it's just a waste of time for everyone. So I want to get the deck. I want to be able to at least get a primer or even a one sheet, some sort of introduction to the platform. See if I'd rather save us both time and say, hey, we're not investing in this right now, the space. I'm just not interested. But you can tell looks can go a long way when it comes to that deck and that one sheet presentation. And that's the thing. My last bit of advice is do not short the deck. Like make your deck look very nice. And it's a kind of a vanity type of thing, but some decks I've seen look so bad. And if you can't put together a coherent, nice to look at deck, I have very little optimism on you being able to put together a successful business. So I tend to rule people out based on that alone. And then obviously, once you're through those hurdles of finding me, knowing that I'm the right kind of investor, getting the deck in front of me and having a deck that looks nice, then you actually got to pitch the business. So then I look at it. The things that I look for within a deck are actually, yes, the business, that it's coherent, sounds cool, something that I would probably personally want to use or be interested in, not too complicated, which I think is a big hurdle in the Web3 space, is using a lot of like buzzwords and acronyms that I tend to just kind of gloss over, and I rule out a lot of those by the nature of our investment thesis. But then I think the biggest part that I think is undersold in a lot of decks as well is the team aspect. So really flaunt your experience and tell me not only why this is a great idea, but why you're the right people to build it. And that it can be hard to do that for especially founders with little entrepreneurial experience. Some will have more than others, but if it's not your experience, it's your story. So how did you come up with this idea? Why are you passionate about it? And why will you stop at nothing to make it a success? That's what I care about. And I think at least a solid idea with a great team behind it, I think those are the two primary things that I would look for in saying, okay, let's have a call and discuss this together.
Absolutely. So piggybacking off that, my next question was going to be, if you can only choose one, and you have to choose this in a company that you're going to invest, do you choose execution or do you choose the team?
Well, typically the team will be the catalyst for that execution. But I think execution comes above all else, including team in this case. So if we narrow team to like a team's resume versus the actual execution of that team, it's obviously the execution 100 times out of 100. And that's the other big thing too, is that especially going back to the whole founder seeing their business as their baby, every entrepreneur is going to think their idea is brilliant and may even take offense to any criticism or feedback on the idea itself, where any idea is only as good as the people who are able to execute it. So I'm less interested. That goes back to why I'm interested in the team to begin with, is because those ideas that are logically sound that I've seen 50 times over after getting pitched different businesses over the past year, but oftentimes I don't invest because I don't believe in the person that's going to be building it. And for that matter, when you consider that any great idea in Web3 right now is probably being built by dozens, if not hundreds of other people around the world, whether you realize it or not, it's going to be the execution that separates you as the winner through this arms race in the coming years. So execution is like the most important thing at this stage, for sure.
Absolutely. So Sam, finally, we're moving on to the last section of this interview. This is my personal favorite section. It's called rapid fire questions, where I get to understand the thought patterns of my interviewees and how they think, right? And you're free to take this question in any way that you like, philosophical or the current stage that we have, right? Because what I'm trying to understand is how you think about the future.
Sure.
So let me give this question to you. Do you see the metaverse arms race, as you rightly said? Is that going to be a winner take all, or do you think there is going to be fragments where you have small pockets of companies that have established their own niches?
Fragment. I'll try to go short with these because it is lightning round. Fragmented based upon experience and based upon, well, experience is a catch-all, but I'll then diverge that further into like the actual use case. So like I mentioned e-commerce, social, gaming previously, but then also into the technology. So thinking about AR, VR, and whatever is to come in the future in ways to engage with that metaverse. We'll separate them.
Absolutely. You talked a little bit about how this winter of crypto feels much more bad because the general mom and pop is invested in it, right? And we know that the global disease of 2020 triggered the mass adoption of cryptocurrencies and blockchain and other related services, right? According to your position that you're sitting at, and you get a lot of deal flow and you're working with a lot of smart founders and getting a lot of information that you're probably privy to that the rest of the world isn't. What, according to you, will trigger the mass adoption of Metaverse in Web3?
It's a bit on the heels of the global disease you reference, but I think remote work plays into this. And say what you will about them, I think Meta is doing a brilliant job of this, in terms of creating their metaverse, if you want to call it that, which they clearly do based upon the fact they changed their company name to Meta. But they're going use case first versus metaverse first, and by that I mean, as they're building, they're telling you how you're going to use it. Whereas if you see like if you like the true decentralized and metaverses I love and the ones that I look to, like Decentraland, like Sandbox, it's a bit of an open world in a positive way, but also in a negative way, in that like I don't know what to do with it. And it's a blank canvas. And as long as that canvas remains blank, I don't know how I'm going to engage with it. Whereas Meta is taking a very much approach that A, they have the hardware with Oculus, B, they're going down the road of collaboration and working, where I see like as we sit here on a Zoom, we're doing an interview here, but I personally I hate being on camera all day, every day. So a lot of times I hop on a Zoom and I hide my camera, not because I'm hiding anything, but just because don't like being looked at all day. I would love to engage in a metaverse environment for work. I would love to have an avatar that makes me approachable and personable without having to actually appear on screen all the time. Like there's an immediate use case there that tells me I know it's very like anti Web3, but I would love to engage with Meta to utilize this tool for future work purposes. And I think that's what's lacking to me. And I realize that's the answer to the a non-answer to the question, but back to the question is around what are the trends that are going to accelerate adoption? I think remote work is a big one, and just around just general globalization in a way, and like global connectivity and creating a closeness amongst people that was accelerated through 2020 that can be made more authentic and immersive through metaverse experiences.
Absolutely. So since you talked about Meta, my next question is gonna sort of vein in that. So as you look at the arms race of metaverse, do you see big tech taking the lead, or do you see companies like Upland or Sandbox or Decentraland carving out a niche for themselves and sort of taking the rightful lead position within the metaverse industry?
I don't have a great answer to this, and I hate to like call my shot on it because I think there's a lot of question marks that remain to be unanswered. I think there's space for both. I think they're going to offer different experiences across each. I do hope that Meta comes to the middle more and becomes. I don't expect them to be like a fully decentralized and truly open metaverse, but it'd be nice to be able to integrate some of like other Web3 facets into what they're doing, like to be able to be my Bored Ape within the Meta ecosystem, which I don't expect to happen, but that would be very cool if it did. I think inherently they're going to be the most successful early on until there's a real use case and value to building things in a decentralized way or engaging with things that are more decentralized than Meta tends to be. So yeah, I think the answer is yes. I think that they take the lead, but I think there's going to be, much like you see in the traditional Web2 e-commerce world today, where you have the conglomerate of Amazon, but then you have small boutique websites for buying locally, for example, or just buying more specialized and niche. I think Meta becomes the behemoth in the room of the metaverse, and then you have more boutique metaverses that could be more decentralized in this future world.
Do you see Meta allowing true ownership? For instance, if you have Metaverse Land, and I'm just throwing this out there, do you see Meta ever giving away actual true ownership of that Metaverse Land to people that buy that Metaverse Land instead of just holding on to it as the company, in terms of, as you rightly said, being an open metaverse like others have?
No, that was easy. I think I don't even see them having land in the sense of like a sandbox. I see them creating environments where, much like we go on a Zoom, and my background is my background, your background is your background, and the Zoom interface is a Zoom interface. I know what I'm getting. I think that with Meta, you have different interfaces where you don't necessarily create things yourself or buy things or design things. It's rather like, here's the menu of environments within the Meta ecosystem that I can create instances of with my team and collaborators, at least in the early goings. And I think that's what it looks like. I don't think it's like I own this instance, but it's here's an instance that Meta permits me to use with my avatar that is also native and independent to Meta, not interoperable with other environments or anything like that.
Absolutely. What, from your experience, will bring e-commerce to Metaverse?
I mean, NFTs are a big one. So what are the digital things how do I own things digitally, and how can I buy them? And that's a big part of it. Being able to assign value to those digital assets is a big part of it. And that goes back to just the suspension of user expectations and user understanding. And that's a hurdle that we need to surmount still. And then replicatable experiences. And by that, I mean, there's right now, when I need to buy toilet paper or paper towels, I go to Amazon. It's 2 clicks, bing bang boom, easy peasy. Like these are things I need. Right now, the metaverse itself is very cumbersome in terms of entering, finding what I need, and theoretically in this world, buying what I need. So what is it about that experience that makes it better than what I could find on Amazon or Nike.com or elsewhere? And maybe that's like the 3D modeling aspect of it, where I see it on my avatar and then I can then see it on myself. I don't know what that looks like yet, but something that is unique to a metaverse e-commerce experience and can't be replicated elsewhere, I think is going to be important to driving e-commerce behavior in these worlds.
Absolutely.
If you like the video, please hit the like button. If you think what's being discussed is nice and you'd like to join the discussion, please comment below. And if you'd like to stay updated, please subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon. Thank you.
We all know that Amazon's Alexa has been really successful. Do you think the industry and media and everyone as a whole is writing off Alexa too easily and not considering that Alexa, or whether you want to draw parallels with Google Home, is going to be a driving force when it comes to metaverse? Because they have a lot of data that it's built on, right? And if you can integrate that into Web3, there's a lot of use cases that can come out of it. So do you think as watchers or even participants in the industry, Amazon's Alexa is a real competitor to others?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a great answer to that just because I haven't thought about it much. And there's a lot, you said it yourself, there's a lot of facets to this that require some thinking.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily think we've been underestimated. I just don't know if people are thinking about it in the macro context of the metaverse. I think in principle, people are writing off the metaverse and by mainstream standards right now. Like Meta is kind of a punchline of a joke on CNBC and the like with some of the recent performance. So we haven't made the jump to saying, like, if we don't believe in the metaverse, then there's no time to be wasted thinking about Alexa in the context of a metaverse. But if we assume the metaverse to be a future truth, then I think there's inherently we're not even thinking about it yet. But to your point, there's a lot of impact that it has, and I think there's an element too of AI in the metaverse there as well. We've seen AI blow up in recent days, even with the chat bots and the AI art apps that are creating people are creating digital representations of themselves through artwork, making it their profile pictures, and it's really cool to see. But it's, again, it goes back to use case of like, it's only happening because it's providing value to people, and that's not something that the metaverse is doing today. So how can we integrate these things that are providing value into the metaverse, like Alexa? That's super intriguing to me, and I think that's where the high potential stuff lies.
Absolutely. So Sam, it's great that you bring the whole AI chatbot conversation here, because in recent days, we all know the Sam Altman of OpenAI recently launched OpenGPT. What's your opinion on that? Because it's just been 2 days since the announcement's been made. It's really fresh. It's on everyone's mind. Everyone has tons of questions. How do you see that shaping everything?
I mean, it's fun to think about how it shapes, because it's shaping in front of us in real time. I think people have there's this perception of AI as like a Terminator type figure that people are often scared of. I think we overestimate how smart AI is today, but we underestimate how smart it could be. And that is through data accumulation, behavior modeling, and technological development over time. But I see the initial use case of tech like this to be almost like a virtual assistant of sorts. And in fact, I just thought of this. I have a note on my desk here. I have to get a white elephant gift for a party that I have next week. I'm going to go try this, or I'm going to go to Chat GBT and say, give me ideas for white elephant gifts that are $40 or less, or something like that. I think that to me is the most compelling use case for right now, where it's like, it's kind of just like a little voice on your shoulder of, rather than having to go search and ideate, it streamlines that process, but the output itself is still user driven, which I think is great. I think that's phenomenal. I just don't want to get ahead of ourselves. Even like the artwork stuff where people are using this Lensa app these days and posting it on their Instagram and, oh, look how good I look in AI. But this stuff's existed. Like there was the trend a couple of years ago where people were making themselves look like old people, where it's not hard to just like to run a script, whether it be technically AI driven or not, to manipulate a photo based upon certain features based upon a user upload. So it's not like nothing today is necessarily groundbreaking. It's nice to see it get mainstream attention and appeal, but I think we've just scratched the surface of what it becomes. And I don't want to get too focused and too content with the present location versus the future destination of it all.
Absolutely. Sam, since you are living in US, and I don't mean to put anything in political perspective, but we all know President Trump utilized the unfair advantage that Cambridge Analytica gave him for Facebook, right? And we all know that he has recently announced that he's running in 2024 again. So that's where this question's coming from. Do you think that election campaigning would ever happen in the metaverse?
Yeah, I think any outlet for campaigners for politicians to get in front of interested eyeballs is a no-brainer. I mean, we had our big election in early November, and the week leading up to that, I was on my cell phone, both in phone calls and text messages, in my emails, on social media, in my streaming channels. I was seeing nonstop political ads. So I think metaverse advertising, and specifically programmatic advertising and ad networks, think of like the Google AdWords for the metaverse. Like what are those commonly accepted formats for ads, and then where are those ads served in a way that is least intrusive to users, but then also most sticky, I guess, or most retaining and leads to the largest click-throughs and so on the advertiser side. I'm super interested to see. So yeah, I think political ads are just one piece of the pie and all of that, but I think all advertisers end up advertising the metaverse at some point in the future.
Do you think that's gonna bring in a lot of I don't want to say a lot of money, but do you think that's going to bring in significant amount of money that the metaverse needs to grow from, say, an idea from few enthusiasts to going mainstream?
I think if you're seeing that type of money entering the ecosystem from advertisers, it means that the eyeballs exist, which means that money is already coming in elsewhere. So I think that's probably a few steps down the road. It certainly goes a long way. I mean, it's a lot of that's kind of what's made social media what it is today. What's made Google what it is today with AdWords, where that's the jet fuel down the road. But I think we'll already see some mainstream appeal once we get to that point where this has become like a commonly accepted channel for mainstream advertisers.
Absolutely. Sam, we can have this conversation endlessly, and I love to bring you on for another interview as well. But let me ask you the final question of this interview. You said you're a gamer at heart. We've talked a lot about gaming. Within the last couple of years, we've seen the gamification of investing through Robinhood and eToro and other platforms. Almost every sphere that we touch within technology is now being gamified. Do you see the entire internet as being gamified by Web3 and Metaverse?
Yeah, so it's a great question. And actually, I've spent a good deal of time over the past 6 months or so reading up on doing deep dive reading on gamification, tactics, mechanics, and so on. There's a great book that's on gamification by Yu-Kai Chow is the name, which I read, which has completely molded my understanding of gamification. And he has this autolysis model. That's a very nice way to think about it. I think we too commonly think about gamification as games, which is only natural because they come from the same root. However, gamification is all about psychology. So there are life is gamified. Why do we do what we do? We do it for some intrinsic purpose, motivation that ties back to a gamified behavior, which in a vacuum, those things we don't think of them as games, but you aggregate all of those behaviors and psychology into a singular thing, and that becomes a game. Like, the games are what they are because they encapsulate so much gamification, but so many things in life are gamified with small pieces of these things. We just don't even realize it. And then I've further myself gotten in deep into, like, I read like Atomic Habits, like a lot of people did, and I have my little journal right here is like my checkbox of all my daily activities, which has become a little bit of a game for myself of like all the things I have to do on an everyday basis, which I've gamified to make my life more efficient. Like, there's so much of gamification happens in the world around us. So I think the internet is already gamified in a number of ways. Thinking about like as something as commonplace as on Google, where you search something and then you could do search or I'm feeling lucky, and the mystery of that is an element of gamification. Thinking about how Facebook came to be and the networking aspects of pride and whether it be truthful or not, the ownership of having your page, your friends, your achievements, that is gamification. So all of these facets already exist. The metaverse, in the context of this conversation, just unlocks new potential for those things. And NFTs, I referenced ownership in the context of Facebook, which is kind of funny, but NFTs in the context of the metaverse serve to expand what already exists in the world of gamification, which I'm really excited for. So I think, to summarize, gamification is already here in the internet and the metaverse. Like, I don't see that as a new thing, but I think it's going to be expanded to the nth degree with the advent of the metaverse, creating a more immersive environment for it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much, Sam. For everyone watching this video, do go check out Sam. I'll link to his LinkedIn down in the description. He runs Non-Fungibly Curious. So if you're a Web2 company trying to transition to Web3, go reach out to him. If you're a founder, entrepreneur building something interesting, definitely reach out to him. Sam, I'll be expecting my scout fees for that. And
yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Before we end this video, I just leave our viewers with this small saying that I do after every video. You be the arbiter of truth, the viewers of the Metaverse Street Journal. Thank you so very much, Sam. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
If you like the video, please hit the like button. If you think what's being discussed is nice and you'd like to join the discussion, please comment below. And if you'd like to stay updated, please subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon. Thank you.